The smell of new wax and mimeographed paper, which for other children meant a normal day at school, was a prelude to chaos for 8-year-old Sophia. The buzz of voices in the classroom, mixed with the scraping of chairs on the floor, amplified in her head, becoming an unbearable hum. She squeezed her fingers together, a form of self-comfort, and muttered softly, "The train is coming. The horn is going to blow." These were phrases that anchored her, that helped her navigate the overstimulating world around her. Suddenly, the shrill voice of Mrs. Cecilia, her teacher, cut through the air like a whip. "Sophia, how many times do I have to ask you to stop talking to yourself? This is no time for playing. You're disturbing the whole class." Sophia cringed, feeling each syllable like a blow. The children who had been whispering now looked at her, some with curiosity, others with a suppressed giggle. Ms. Cecilia approached, her face contorted with impatience, and grabbed Sophia's arm tightly. "To the principal's office now, and don't give me any of your dream excuses." Sophia felt the floor disappear, her mouth dry. Dreams? No one understood. No one wanted to understand. What did that mean? A child would be expelled for just trying to stay true to herself? The principal's office smelled of lavender and disappointment. Helena, Sophia's mother, felt small and humiliated as Dr. Elisa spoke in a monotone, cold voice. "Mrs. Helena, we need to be frank. Sophia hasn't adapted to our school. She talks to herself all the time, isolates herself, and the other children avoid her. This isn't good for her or for the school environment. Ms. Cecilia, one of our most experienced teachers, has tried everything." Helena felt her heart tighten, cold sweat running down the back of her neck. "But Dr. Elisa, she doesn't talk to herself on purpose. It's her way of calming down, of processing information. She has autism." The principal sighed, looking resigned. "We understand, Mrs. Helena, but we don't have the resources or the time for such specialized care. We think it would be best for Sophia to find a school that better suits her special needs." The words were spoken with false politeness, but the message was clear. Expulsion. At home, Helena vented to her friend Patricia on the phone, tears streaming down her face. "Patricia, they expelled her. They expelled my Sophia for being who she is, for talking to herself." I tried to explain, I begged. "Doctor." Elisa looked at me with pity, as if my suffering were an inconvenience. And Gustavo, Sophia's father, he just said to me, "Helena, I told you this school wasn't going to work out. Now what are we going to do? I don't have time to run around looking for a specialized school." He's more concerned about his image than his daughter. He abandoned me in this fight, Patricia. I feel so alone, so lost. People stare at me on the street. The mothers of Sophia's classmates look away. They think it's a lack of education, a lack of boundaries. No one wants to know that my daughter's autism makes her world a whirlwind of sensations. Those phrases she repeats, the talking to herself, is her way of creating a safety bubble, of protecting herself from the noise and chaos. But no one wants to hear the truth. I blame myself, Patricia. I blame myself for not being able to protect her from this cruel world, for not finding a place where she is accepted, loved for who she is. Why does my daughter have to pay the price for being different? I'm drowning, Patricia. And Sophia, my little Sophia, is drowning with me, in a sea of judgment and rejection. Helena's voice faltered, and Patricia, on the other end of the line, felt her friend's excruciating pain, a despair that seemed endless. Helena's anguish at seeing Sophia rejected pushed her into a maze of false promises. The first solution came from a famous digital influencer, Diva Mente Plena, who promised to cure autism through a radical, vegan diet and daily meditation. "Autism is an energetic condition. With the right diet and high vibrations, your child will be fine," she shouted in her videos. Helena, desperate, spent everything she had on expensive supplements and Diva's workshops. Sophia was put on an extremely restrictive diet that left her hungry and irritable. Meditation attempts were torture for the child, who couldn't sit still and was constantly scolded for not concentrating. The result? Sophia lost weight, became more apathetic, and her irritability increased, proving that mindfulness was pure deception. The second hope came with a television program about cases of overcoming adversity, which promised to transform autistic children into geniuses with a method of intensive stimulation. Dr. Fabio, a renowned neuroscientist on TV, invited Sophia to participate, promising a full scholarship. Sophia's father, Gustavo, reappeared, seduced by the visibility and the chance to have a prodigy daughter. "This is our chance, Helena. Sophia will be famous and everyone will see that she is not defective," he said, with a gleam of ambition in his eyes. Sophia was subjected to exhausting stimulation sessions, with repetitive memorization and logic exercises with no room for play or affection. TV cameras followed everything, turning the child's pain into entertainment. Sophia wasted away. Her eyes lost their sparkle. She stopped talking to herself and began to isolate herself even more, as if she were disconnecting from the world. Dr. Fabio, seeing that Sophia was not becoming a media genius, ended the scholarship, claiming that her case was very complex and without apparent progress. Gustavo, disappointed with the lack of return, disappeared again, taking with him the rest of Helena's hope and leaving her even more alone. The greatest betrayal, however, came from the support network that should have been there. After Sophia's expulsion, Helena sought support from groups of mothers at the school, but was met with pitying looks and distancing. The mothers of Sophia's classmates, once friends, began to avoid Elisa, afraid that Sophia's problem might contaminate their children. The subliminal message was clear. It was Helena's fault for having a different daughter. With every attempt to help, with every false hope, Helena and Sophia's pain only increased, sinking them into a cycle of despair and misunderstanding, an uncertain future where Sophia was just a burden. Helena's life after Sophia's expulsion from school became a daily battlefield, where the main enemy was judgment, the forced silence in the house, the absence of children's laughter other than Sophia's, echoed the pain of rejection. The neighbor across the street, Donna Regina, made a point of casting pitying glances mixed with morbid curiosity, and whenever she saw Helena, she whispered, "Poor woman, with a child like that. She must not have any peace at home." These words, which Helena knew by heart, were like fine needles piercing her skin. But the real conflict, the one that consumed her, was within her own family. Deep down, Gustavo, Sophia's father, was the pillar of denial and escape. He had turned his work into a refuge, fleeing the house at every sign of stress. "Helena, I've told you, this child needs to go to boarding school. They know how to deal with these cases there. We can't go on like this. It's no life for anyone." He would explode on the phone, without even looking at his daughter. His indifference was a slow poison, corroding what little hope Helena had left. He refused to participate in therapy, to read about autism, to accept that Sophia had different needs. For him, autism was a problem to be outsourced, a stain on his perfect family. Helena's family, her parents and siblings, were not a safe haven either. Her sister Carla, always with a forced smile and good advice, kept saying, "Helena, you're sacrificing too much. Leave Sophia at my parents' house for a while. They can take care of her, or at least you'll have some time to breathe." The idea of fixing Sophia, as if she were a broken object, turned Helena's stomach. Her parents, Mr. Ricardo and Mrs. Ana Lucia, with an air of resignation, could only sigh and repeat, "That girl is so difficult. God knows what you did to deserve this." The truth that no one wanted to tell was that they didn't want the truth. They wanted a cure, a normality that would relieve them of the social burden of having an autistic granddaughter. The last straw came when Helena, desperately trying to find a new school for Sophia, visited more than 10 institutions. At all of them, she received the same veiled response: "We don't have openings for cases like your daughter's." At one of them, the principal bluntly said, "Look, Mrs. Helena, the truth is that children who talk to themselves and have these repetitive behaviors disrupt the class dynamic. The other students' parents complain. We don't want any problems." Helena left that school with her legs shaking, feeling like trash. The humiliation was unbearable. It was social expulsion. In that moment of absolute despair, alone and without support, Helena found herself at a dead end. The truth that no one wanted to tell, the cruel truth, was that the world was not ready to accept Sophia, and that she, her mother, would have to fight alone against a system of exclusion and ignorance. Helena's revenge would not be against the school, but proof that Sophia, even talking to herself, had a lot to say and teach. The abyss of rejection in which Helena found herself was deep. The humiliation of Sophia's expulsion, Gustavo's indifference, the judgment of her family and society. Everything pushed her to the brink of despair. But it was at this breaking point that an unexpected voice emerged, a voice that promised not miraculous cures, but understanding. In an online support group for atypical mothers, which she had avoided. For months, Helena saw a post by a woman named Mariana. Mariana didn't talk about diagnoses, but about glances and connections. She talked about the importance of entering the child's world, not the other way around. Something in Mariana's tone, so different from the false hopes Helena had already encountered, made her stop. Helena, with her last shred of hope, contacted Mariana. They arranged to meet for coffee. Mariana was the mother of an autistic teenager and worked as an occupational therapist, focusing on sensory integration and alternative communication. She listened to Helena for hours, without judgment, without interruption. "Your daughter isn't talking to herself, Helena," Mariana said in a calm, firm voice. "She's self-regulating, processing the world out loud." These phrases are like anchors for her. Mariana's words were a balm for Helena's wounded soul. For the first time, someone didn't see Sophia's behavior as a problem, but as a language. The quiet turnaround began with small changes. Mariana introduced Helena to simple sensory integration techniques that could be applied at home. They created a safe corner for Sophia, a small space with dim lighting, cushions, and tactile toys, where she could take refuge when she felt overwhelmed. Mariana taught Helena to observe Sophia's patterns, to understand what triggered her speeches, and how to interact with them. If Sophia said, "The train is coming," Helena, instead of scolding her, would respond, "Yes, Sophia, the train is coming. Let's listen to the train." She began to validate Sophia's universe, to enter into it, instead of trying to pull her out. Marcos, who observed the gradual change in Sophia and the serenity that began to emerge in Helena, began to approach them with curiosity and caution. Mariana invited him to a session, and there, with her calmness and clarity, he finally began to understand. "Your son doesn't need to be fixed," Mariana told Marcos. "He needs to be understood and accepted. Wings to fly, and a safe place to land." The truth that no one wanted to tell was that the solution was not in expensive methods or healing institutions, but in the patience, acceptance, and unconditional love of a mother who refused to give up, and in the help of someone who saw the beauty in neurodiversity. Helena's revenge would not be against the school or the family that rejected her, but proof that Sophia, with the right support, would flourish in her own essence. The first victory, the sweetest and most unexpected, was a look of mutual recognition. Sophia, who previously could barely hold eye contact, now fixed her curious eyes on Helena and Marcos, especially when they invited her to play in her safe corner. It was a look that said, "I see you, and I know you see me," a connection that warmed Helena's heart. Then came the sound of interaction. Sophia still murmured her self-regulatory phrases, but now she often accompanied them with a gesture, a direction. One day, while in her safe corner, she said, "The train is coming," and Helena, following Mariana's instructions, asked, "Where is the train going, Sophia?" To Helena's surprise, Sophia, with a soft smile, pointed to a book about trains on the shelf. It was communication, a bridge, an invitation into her world. Marcos, who was watching, felt a lump in his throat. The biggest step, however, came with a voluntary gesture of affection. Sophia, who always avoided physical touch, one day, after a session of sensory play with Helena, reached out her little hand and touched her mother's face. It was a delicate caress, an act of trust and affection that was worth more than any words. Helena hugged her tightly, and Sophia, to everyone's surprise, returned the hug, nestling in her lap. Sophia's crises, once violent and unpredictable, decreased dramatically in frequency and intensity. When sensory overload occurred, she did not panic. She sought out her safe corner, or the calm presence of Helena or Marcos, who knew how to calm her with gentle touches and quiet voices. They learned to identify the early signs and intervene before the crisis set in, using the tools taught by Mariana. Sophia's talking to herself, once a reason for expulsion, was now understood as part of her rich and complex internal language. an echo of her mind working in a unique way. Sophia's small victories were not just developmental milestones. They were small daily miracles that redefined Anna and Marcos's happiness, proving that love, patience, and acceptance were the true foundations for their child's life, building a future of hope and dignity, far from the judgments of the past. Sophia's transformation from a silenced and misunderstood girl to a child who was beginning to find her voice and her place in the world was the relentless mirror that forced Helena and Marcos to confront their own truths and flaws. Helena realized that in her desperate search for a cure and social acceptance, she had forgotten to celebrate who Sophia really was, to love her uniqueness. The guilt that had been eating away at her diminished, replaced by a painful but necessary realization. She had allowed the judgment of others, the ignorance of the school, and Gustavo's stubborn denial to dictate Sophia's worth and future. Marcos, the once distant and emotionally absent father, became a constant and active presence. He saw Sophia's bright eyes as she interacted with the world in her own way, the genuine joy in her small achievements, and felt a lump in his throat that was a mixture of regret and a love that was reborn, stronger than ever. Mrs. Cecilia, Dr. Elisa, and the judgment of Helena's family, who had once hurt her so deeply, gradually became nothing more than distant echoes. Helena's revenge was not retaliation or a desire to cause pain, but living, undeniable proof that Sophia was not a problem to be fixed, but a blessing, a gift that taught them about the true meaning of loving, unconditionally, of accepting without reservation, of seeing the beauty in neurodiversity. Acceptance was not synonymous with giving up, but rather with liberation. Liberation from the relentless search for a non-existent cure, liberation from the suffocating weight of others' judgment, liberation from the guilt that consumed and paralyzed them. Sophia didn't need to be fixed. She needed to be loved and understood in her uniqueness, in her unique way of being and expressing herself. The pain of the journey was still there, because life with autism would always have its challenges, but now it was accompanied by a deep gratitude and renewed strength. Sophia's talking to herself, which got her expelled from school, became the truth that no one wanted to tell, that the deepest communication does not always require conventional words, and that love and understanding can transform rejection into a path to blossoming. Life in Helena and Marcos's home did not magically turn into a fairy tale, without problems. The challenges inherent in Sophia's autism persisted, and the journey was still long, full of new obstacles and constant learning. But the family that had formed there, redefined by love, struggle, and understanding, had found something much more valuable than a cure. They had discovered the brutal truth of reality and the unshakable strength of their own union. Marcos, the father who had once hidden in denial, now flew high alongside his daughter through the complex and fascinating labyrinths of her private universe, with a new purpose, unconditional love, and a constant presence. Helena, with her heart finally at peace and a new purpose in life, saw in each of Sophia's small achievements, in each understanding glance, in each sound, living proof that true love and patience were the greatest superpowers that could exist, capable of moving mountains and transforming lives in a profound and lasting way. Sophia's family, once marked by judgment and cruel laughter, became a place of learning, inclusion, and acceptance. Not only for Sophia, but for everyone who was touched by her journey and witnessed her incredible transformation, inspiring others to do the same. Mrs. Cecilia, Dr. Elisa, Gustavo, and Helena's family, who once judged her, abandoned her, or considered her a problem, were gradually silenced, not by direct confrontation, but by the very light Sophia radiated, by her calm and serene presence, by her silent and powerful evolution. Helena's revenge was not retaliation or a desire to cause pain, but irrefutable proof that prejudice and ignorance can be disarmed and even crushed by the unshakable dignity and unconditional love of a family that refuses to give up. Sophia, the girl who was expelled from school for talking to herself, taught everyone that communication transcends spoken words, that true intelligence lies in the ability to listen with the heart, and that inclusion is not a favor granted, but a fundamental and universal right. They understood that life with autism is a continuous journey, an adventure of daily discoveries and miracles, not a final destination or a sentence, and that each day is a new opportunity to love, accept, and thrive together, celebrating every step at Sophia's unique pace. Not every voice needs words to be heard. Sometimes the loudest cry of strength is in the silence of a glance, in the whisper of a phrase that soothes the soul, or in the unwavering determination of a family that decides that their child is worth every battle, every journey, every moment of understanding. Because true love does not silence those who are different. It amplifies every sound, every gesture, every quirk that makes life unique, complete, and richer. If the story of Sophia and her family touched your heart, if you have felt the pain of rejection and the joy of acceptance, then this message is for you. Don't let this powerful story end here, in your mind. Leave your comment and share your thoughts. What did this story awaken in you? What lesson do you take away for your life? Share this story with someone who needs to hear this truth, this message of hope and courage, today. And if you want to continue to be inspired by stories that transform and remind us of the power of acceptance, sign up and join us in building a world where every child, regardless of how their voice is expressed, is seen, valued, celebrated, and above all, understood. Your voice, your engagement, your empathy can change the world around us one heart at a time. Let's sow acceptance and reap love together, paving the way for everyone to flourish.